The fluorescent lights of St. Michael's Hospital hummed their familiar tune as I made my rounds on the cardiac unit. It was a Thursday evening in late November, and the corridors smelled of antiseptic and the cafeteria's reheated meatloaf. I'd been a nurse here for 7 years, long enough to know which vending machines still worked and which doctors actually listened when you paged them. That's when I first saw him. Room 412 had been empty that morning, but now it housed a man who looked far older than the 63 years listed on his chart. His name was Robert Mitchell, and according to the sparse information I'd received during shift change, he'd been brought in by ambulance after collapsing at a bus stop downtown. Advanced heart failure. The prognosis wasn't good. "Mr. Mitchell?" I knocked softly on the doorframe, though the door was already open. "I'm Sarah Chen, one of the nurses on this floor. I'll be taking care of you tonight." He turned his head slowly, and I was struck by how blue his eyes were, the color of a winter sky just before snow. They held a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Just Robert," he said, his voice raspy and thin. "Nobody's called me Mister in years." I moved to check his vitals, noting the irregular rhythm on the heart monitor. His blood pressure was dangerously low. The IV drip feeding medications into his arm was the only thing keeping him relatively stable. "Is there anyone I can call for you, Robert? Family members who should know you're here?" Something shifted in his expression, a tightening around his mouth, a dimming of those blue eyes. "No family, not anymore." I'd heard variations of this answer before, but something in his tone made me pause. It wasn't bitterness or self-pity. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered with the same neutrality he might have used to comment on the weather. "Friends, then? A neighbor?" He shook his head slightly, the effort seeming to tire him. "Lost touch with most folks over the years. Happens when you move around as much as I did. Construction work took me all over the country. By the time I retired, I realized I'd built a lot of buildings, but not much of a life." I finished checking his vitals and updated his chart, but I found myself lingering in the doorway. Something about Robert Mitchell tugged at me, a loneliness so profound it seemed to fill the room like a physical presence. "Well," I said, surprising myself, "you've got me, at least for the next 12 hours. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That's kind of you, Sarah, but I've been alone a long time. I'm used to it." "Nobody should be used to being alone," I said quietly, and left before he could respond. Over the next few days, I found reasons to spend extra time in room 412. I'd bring Robert cups of the good coffee from the staff lounge. Instead of the weak hospital brew, I'd adjust his pillows and open the blinds, so he could watch the bare tree branches swaying outside his window. During my breaks, I'd sit in the chair beside his bed and we'd talk. Robert had stories, so many stories locked inside a man the world had forgotten. He told me about building the Gateway Arch extension in St. Louis, about working on high-rises in Chicago, where the wind would knock you sideways if you weren't careful. He talked about a woman named Eleanor he'd almost married back in the 70s, but she'd wanted stability and he'd wanted adventure, and neither had been willing to compromise. "Do you regret it?" I asked one evening, my shift nearly over but my feet not quite ready to carry me to the door. He considered the question for a long moment, his eyes distant. "I regret not being braver," he finally said, his voice cracking slightly. "I was brave about climbing steel beams 40 stories up, but I was a coward about the things that really mattered, about letting people in, about staying." He paused, swallowing hard. By the time I figured out what really mattered, everyone had moved on, and I was just alone. The rawness in his voice broke something open inside me. I reached over and took his hand. He flinched at first, as if he'd forgotten what human touch felt like. Then his fingers closed around mine with surprising strength. "You're not alone right now," I whispered. A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. "No," he said. "No, I'm not." Dr. Harrison, the attending cardiologist, pulled me aside on my 4th shift caring for Robert. Her expression was grave. "His heart function is deteriorating rapidly," she said, keeping her voice low. "We've discussed his options, but at this stage, he's not a candidate for transplant or surgery. We're keeping him comfortable, but Sarah, It's going to be days, not weeks. I felt my throat tighten. Does he know? He knows. He's remarkably at peace with it, actually. More at peace than most patients I've had in his situation. She paused, studying my face. You've been spending a lot of time with him. He doesn't have anyone else. I know, just remember, Dr. Harrison's own eyes looked suspiciously bright. Remember that what you're doing for him matters. More than any medicine we could give him. That evening, when I entered Robert's room, he was staring out the window at the darkening sky. The sun was setting early now, painting the clouds in shades of orange and purple. Beautiful, isn't it? He said without turning. I spent so much of my life looking at the world from angles most people never see, from scaffolding, from rooftops, from the top floors of buildings that didn't even have walls yet. But I never just sat still and watched a sunset like this. Too busy, always too busy. I pulled the chair closer to his bed and sat down, my own eyes on the dying light. Tell me what else you missed. His voice was soft, almost dreamy. I never had a dog. Always wanted one, a big goofy golden retriever, the kind that doesn't know it's too big to be a lapdog. Never saw the real ocean, just glimpses of it from construction sites. He turned to look at me then, his blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Never had kids. That's the big one. No one to remember me. No one to say, my father built that building. Or my dad used to tell me this story. Just buildings that'll probably be torn down eventually, and stories that die with me. My own eyes were burning now. Buildings matter, Robert. You created spaces where people live and love and raise. Those kids you're talking about. You literally built parts of this country. But who will remember? His voice broke on the last word. When I'm gone, it'll be like I never existed at all. I moved from the chair to the edge of his bed, both of my hands now holding his one. I'll remember. I'll remember Robert Mitchell, who was brave enough to build skyscrapers, but honest enough to admit he was scared of the end, who spent his life moving but finally learned the beauty of staying still, who taught a burned-out nurse that every single person matters, whether they have a big family or no family at all. He was crying openly now, and so was I. Thank you, he choked out. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting me. The next night, Robert took a turn for the worse. His breathing became labored, his skin taking on a grayish tinge despite the oxygen. I was supposed to go off shift at 7, but I found myself unable to leave. I called my roommate Jessica, the patient with no family. She asked gently when I explained. Yeah, Jess, I can't leave him. Not tonight. Then don't, she said simply. Some things are more important than dinner plans. Go be with him. I spent the hours beside Robert's bed. Sometimes I talked, sharing stories about my own life, my childhood, my dreams, my fears. Sometimes we sat in silence, just breathing together. He drifted in and out of consciousness. But whenever he woke, his eyes would search for me. And when he found me still there, something like peace would settle over his features. Around 2 in the morning, during one of his more alert moments, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Sarah, I'm here. I'm so scared. The admission seemed torn from somewhere deep inside him. I've faced a lot of things without flinching. But this, not knowing if there's anything after, or just nothing at all, I'm terrified. I climbed fully onto the bed beside him, careful of the wires and tubes, and took his hand in both of mine. It's okay to be scared, Robert. You don't have to be brave about this. Will you stay? His voice was like a child's, small and frightened, and heartbreakingly vulnerable. Until it's over? I don't want to die alone. Please, Sarah, I don't want to be alone anymore. Tears were streaming down my face, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not going anywhere. I promise you, Robert. You won't be alone. Not for 1 second. His grip tightened on my hand. I wasted so much time, he whispered. So much time being afraid of the wrong things. You're not wasting this time. You're right here, right now. You're letting someone care about you. That takes more courage than anything else you've ever done. Over the next day and a half, I barely left his side. Other nurses brought me coffee, sandwiches I couldn't eat. Maria, a veteran nurse who'd seen everything, sat with me during one of Robert's sleeping periods. You know you can't save everyone, she said gently. I'm not trying to save him. I'm just trying to make sure he knows he mattered, that someone cared. Maria's eyes were wet. Then you've already succeeded. Sunday evening arrived with a bitter wind that rattled the windows. Robert's breathing had become increasingly irregular. Long, gasping breaths followed by frightening pauses. Dr. Harrison checked on him around 6 and didn't need to say anything. I could see it in her face. I returned to Robert's bedside and carefully climbed back onto the bed, lying beside him, holding his hand against my heart. His eyes fluttered open. "Still here," he whispered, and I wasn't sure if he was asking or stating. "Still here," I confirmed, my voice breaking. "Right beside you. Right where I'm supposed to be. Thank you for everything, for making the end." He struggled for breath. "Less lonely. You made me less lonely too, Robert. You reminded me why I became a nurse. You gave me a gift." A single tear rolled from the corner of his eye into his hair. "I wish I'd lived differently, but I'm grateful for this." The hours crawled by. I held Robert close and talked to him, my voice hoarse from crying and exhaustion. I told him everything would be okay, that he'd lived a good life, that he'd done his best. I told him about the photo I'd found in his things, young Robert sitting on a steel beam high above a city, grinning at the camera so full of life and possibility. "That young man," I whispered, "he lived his life the best way he knew how. He worked hard. He survived. He built beautiful things. And at the very end, he opened his heart. He let someone in. That's not a wasted life, Robert. That's a brave life." Around 11 that night, his breathing changed again, becoming shallower, the pauses longer. Each time his chest rose, I held my breath, waiting to see if it would fall again. Each time he inhaled, I felt grateful for one more moment. "It's okay," I whispered into his ear, my tears falling onto his hospital gown. "You can rest now. You don't have to fight anymore. I'm right here. You're not alone. You'll never be alone again." His fingers gave mine the faintest pressure, a goodbye, a thank you, a final connection between two souls. "I've got you," I whispered. "I've got you, Robert. You're safe. You're loved. You can let go." His chest rose one more time, fell slowly, then rose again more shallowly. The pause that followed stretched out, seconds becoming eternity. I pressed my forehead against his shoulder, feeling his warmth, his humanness, his presence. And then quietly, like a man finally laying down his burden after carrying it for too long, Robert Mitchell breathed his last breath. The heart monitor's sustained tone cut through the room, but I couldn't move. I stayed there, holding him, my tears soaking into the sheets, my body shaking with sobs I'd been holding back for days. "Thank you," I whispered into the silence. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for mattering." When I finally stood, my legs were numb and my face was swollen from crying. I turned off the monitor and looked down at Robert's face. The lines of pain and fear had smoothed away, leaving something that looked like peace, like relief, like a man who'd finally made it home. I stayed while they came for his body. I gathered his few possessions, the photo of young Robert, a worn wallet, a keychain with no keys. There was no family to call, no one waiting for news. Just a county coroner and eventually a cremation service for those with no one to claim them. But Robert hadn't been no one, not to me. 2 weeks later, I stood in the county cemetery on a cold December morning. I'd found out where his ashes had been interred. Plot 247, Section C, marked with a simple plaque that listed only his name and dates. I brought flowers, bright yellow chrysanthemums that seemed too cheerful for the grey day. As I stood there, the wind biting through my coat, I realized something profound. Robert had worried about having no legacy, no one to remember him. But he'd been wrong. He'd changed me. He'd cracked open something in my heart that had been slowly hardening from years of keeping professional distance. He'd reminded me that every person, every single person, deserves to be seen, to be known, to matter to someone. I would carry him with me always. In every patient's hand I held, in every lonely person I took an extra moment to sit with, in every time I chose connection over convenience, presence over protocol. "You weren't alone," I said out loud, my words carried away by the wind. "And you won't be forgotten. I promise you that, Robert. You mattered. You still matter. And you always will. A sob caught in my throat, but it wasn't just grief. It was gratitude. Gratitude for having known him even briefly. Gratitude for the privilege of being present for his final journey. Gratitude for the way he'd transformed me simply by allowing me to care. I placed the flowers on his grave, my fingers lingering on the cold metal of the plaque. "Rest easy," I whispered. "You don't have to be scared anymore. You don't have to be alone. You made it home." I walked back to my car. I felt Robert with me, not as a ghost, but as a presence woven into who I was now. A reminder that the most important things we do in this life aren't always the big, visible things. Sometimes it's just sitting beside someone in their darkest hour, holding their hand, bearing witness, saying, "I see you. You matter. You're not alone." That evening, I returned to St. Michael's for my shift. Room 412 had a new patient now, a woman named Margaret recovering from cardiac surgery. She had visitors, a husband, 2 adult children, a grandson who couldn't sit still. But down the hall was room 408, and inside was an elderly man with no one's name listed under emergency contacts. I could see it in his eyes when I introduced myself, that same loneliness, that same fear of being forgotten. "I'm Sarah," I said, pulling a chair close to his bed, "and I'm going to be taking care of you." As I settled in beside him, ready to listen, ready to stay, I felt something warm bloom in my chest. It felt like purpose. It felt like love. It felt like Robert's final gift to me, the understanding that we save each other simply by being present, simply by caring, simply by refusing to let anyone face the darkness alone. And in a world that often feels cold and disconnected, that might be the most important work any of us ever do.